Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. A lot of storylines surrounding this Michigan program over the last couple of days and weeks. And I think most notably, the most recent one is the future of Wink Martindale at the defensive coordinator spot. Obviously, taking NFL interviews to become a defensive coordinator on Sundays. That's a big storyline. Wink Martindale, towards the end of 2024, this defense became, for lack of better terms, elite. And I think there's a lot of confidence that this Michigan defense can be really, really good in 2025. The way I look at it as a Michigan fan, you're obviously hoping for one more year of Wink Martindale, right? We made that very clear when we talked about it a couple of days ago. But if it's not Wink Martindale and Michigan either promotes a guy like Lamar Morgan or has to go out and hire a defensive coordinator, one, from a personnel standpoint, feel pretty good about this defense. I mean, there are a lot of guys that could be going to the NFL draft that decided to come back to Michigan for one more year. And then secondly, Michigan has such a strong track record of hiring defensive coordinators over the last couple of years. You look at Wink Martindale, you look at Jesse Minter, you look at Mike McDonald. That's been a very effective side of the football in terms of coordinator hires. And if Wink Martindale does, in fact, leave to the NFL, that immediately becomes one of the most attractive defensive coordinator positions that you see in all of college football. When you become the defensive coordinator at Michigan, good things are going to happen. And so as a Michigan fan, I look at it and say, yeah, it's for sure a storyline, something that we might have to talk a lot about over the next couple of weeks. But I don't know if it's my biggest concern. I think the biggest storyline for Michigan heading into 2025, bar none, is, hey, do we build an offense around Bryce Underwood that he can come in and have success immediately? You make no mistake about it. If Michigan does something special in 2025, 2026, 2027, it's going to be with Bryce Underwood running this offense the next couple of years. But specifically in 2025, did we put enough around Bryce Underwood for him to have immediate success as a true freshman quarterback? That's the question that a lot of Michigan fans have to answer. Now, I would love to hear from the Michigan fans in the comment section. I've gone back and forth with my brother. We're going to talk about all the position groups, but most notably the offensive line, the pass catchers. We're going to highlight a pass catcher that I think is probably flying under the radar for a lot of Michigan fans. Before we get into it, as always, to the Michigan fans, just want to say thank you to you guys. It's been really fun talking this program, and as a Michigan fan, I've had a blast. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one, and let's start. I mean, what do we know going in? One, Chip Lindsey, massive hire, right? We think Chip Lindsey is an offensive coordinator that has a proven track record of developing good offenses, but more importantly, and I think the main reason Sharon Moore went in this direction, really good track record at developing quarterbacks, most notably Drake May a couple of years ago. The running back room, there ain't no questions for me here. Yeah, Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall, like what we know about Justice Haynes and what we just saw from Jordan Marshall in that bowl game against Alabama. Yes, a little bit Michigan tinted glasses here, but I'll say this. I feel pretty confident saying that's going to be one of the better running back rooms that we see in the country in the 2025 year. The next question for me is this offensive line good enough? And should Michigan look to add one more body to the offensive line heading into spring practice? I think the answer is clear. Sharon Moore has been pretty not vocal to the media, but he's been kicking around some other offensive linemen. We went after that kid from Washington State who committed to Wake Forest. You go after Shiaz Pete from New Mexico State at tackle. You're also going after Daniel King from Troy at guard. It does seem like Sharon Moore wants to add another offensive lineman. Now the question is that just because Sharon Moore wants as many good offensive linemen as possible going into 2025, or does he think there's an actual need on the offensive line position? My take is I feel pretty good with what the starting five might look like. You start with Evan Link, who, yes, it was not good early in 2024, right? As a redshirt freshman, there were some growing pains for him at right tackle, but consistently got better and then switched over to left tackle, and I thought looked pretty dang solid. The biggest storyline coming out of that bowl game, I think we're going to do a film breakdown on it, was Andrew Sprague at right tackle was absolutely nails as a true freshman. And so you kind of start looking at what this depth chart, what this offensive line is going to look like in the 2025 year, and you say, feel pretty good about Evan Link and Andrew Sprague. Now, here's the storyline. Is there a third tackle that we feel good about? And do we feel like there's enough competitive depth in the room? And this is something that's really important. What made Michigan special in 2023 on the offensive line? Yes, it was a veteran offensive line, a lot of which are playing in the NFL right now, but it was also deep. When Zach Sinner went down, you just kick Carson Barnhart in the guard, Trente Jones rolls into right tackle, and it was a seamless transition. Does Michigan have that going into 2025? That's probably the question mark. I think you start with Brady Norton. Is he a guy that's ready to go going into 2025? I'm a big Brady Norton fan. And you go back to some of that FCS film, he was rock solid in pass protection. I believe he's 0 sacks and only 4 quarterback pressures on like 400 pass pro snaps. The graded out, how he graded out was elite. Does that translate to the Big Ten level? Because the one knock on Brady Norton is the physicality might not quite be there. And so that's probably the name you're looking at and saying, all right, do we think Brady Norton can be a serviceable offensive tackle for Michigan in 2025? If that answer is yes, then I feel like you feel good about 3 offensive tackles heading into spring practice. Then the next question is Andrew Babaloa. How we've always talked about Andrew Babaloa ever since he committed to Michigan was freaky guy. He's going to be a very good offensive tackle for Michigan at some point, but he's rather new to football. He's a developmental prospect that has massive upside, but I don't know if he's a guy that you feel great about throwing out there year one. Now, it's interesting because the other 5-star offensive tackle that Michigan's trying to close on, Ty Haywood, who's going to be on campus this weekend. Ty Haywood, when I look at him, coming from the state of Texas, has been pretty much born and bred to play offensive tackle for the last 7 years. I look at Ty Haywood and say, that's a guy that could play early, but we won't know the answer to that until he enrolls in the summer because he's not an early enrollee. And so the way I look at it is I respect the opinion, and this is my brother's take, that hey, we think we have our guys in Evan Link, Sprague, Brady Norton, potentially Andrew Babaloa, potentially Blake Frazier, who needs to put on a little bit of weight. The way I look at it is I want to make sure it's really ready to rock and roll. And I wouldn't mind bringing in that kid from New Mexico State, Shayaz Pete, who's 6'8", 320. I think one offers you an experienced left tackle that's played a lot of football, but also, I think there's some upside to that kid. I wouldn't mind adding one more because I think the depth and competitive depth means a lot to Michigan. Someone to push Evan Link and say, hey, Evan Link, if you want to start as a redshirt sophomore, we think you can, but you got to beat out a guy like Shayaz Pete. And then you have a Shayaz Pete sitting on the bench who provides very adequate depth to that position. I think the offensive line's in a solid spot, but I wouldn't mind seeing just, especially at the tackle position, one guy that has a little bit more experience. Because at the end of the day, you got Evan Link, who's going to be a redshirt sophomore, 1 year starting experience, very limited experience at left tackle. You have Andrew Sprague, who has 1 start under his belt. You have Brady Norton, who's coming from the FCS, and you got a true freshman, Andrew Babaloa, and Blake Frazier, who's going to be a redshirt freshman who hasn't made a start. There's only 15 returning starts between those 4 tackles we just talked about. Maybe a little bit more experience. Now, the other position that has probably been the most talked about is the pass catchers. Now, you feel really good about the tight ends. Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, feel great about that. Are the pass catchers at the wide receiver spot, are they good enough? I've been doing a lot of work on Donovan McCulley, and we're going to do a film study on him probably sometime late January, early February, and everything kind of dies down. Donovan McCulley, to me, is that I'm high on him. Because you look at Donovan McCulley and say he was a quarterback prospect that spent his first 2 years at Indiana playing the quarterback position, slowly transitioned to wide receiver. In 2023, really his first full offseason, transitioned as a wide receiver, caught over 650 yards, 6 touchdowns, really good at the contested catch point, a guy that can make things happen when that football is in the air. He's just a body type and a kind of wide receiver that we did not have. I think you feel really optimistic about Fred Moore, what you saw in that Alabama game in the bowl game. It's hard to evaluate guys like Fred Moore, guys like Samaj Morgan, Kenny Bell too, just because the quarterback play was so bad. And so what I think the process here for Michigan is, hey, we could have gone and pushed our chips in for a wide receiver in the portal and paid a pretty penny for it. Or we can sit back, go into spring practice and say, all right, let's find out a little bit more of what we have with Fred Moore, Samaj Morgan, Kendrick Bell, and then Andrew Marsh, true freshman. We just saw a laundry list of true freshman wide receivers have massive impacts year one in the 2024 season. Obviously, headlined by Ohio State Buckeye Jeremiah Smith, but Ryan Williams, Cam Coleman, laundry list of other names. There's a really good chance Andrew Marsh is a big time contributor for Michigan immediately as a true freshman. I think the thought process here is let's see what we have in spring before we go out and try to add a big name wide receiver. And if we go through spring practice and say, hey, wouldn't mind having one more guy in the spring portal window, I promise you there will be some wide receivers available. Maybe that's where you see Michigan get aggressive. But as of right now, I probably should have added Anthony Simpson to this list. I have him starting in the slot. As of right now, I think Michigan's playing the wait and see game and say, hey, let's get a better feel for what our wide receivers are. We're going to be able to get a better feel because we got Bryce Underwood and Mikey Kiensling and the rock to them and Jaden Davis. That's probably the question here. So are the pass catchers good enough? That was a long way of answering. I think we're going to find out in spring practice. And it's kind of interesting to note that Michigan, they kicked around some wide receivers, Troy Stellato, Skylar Bell, but it never seemed to be that Michigan was in it for the elite caliber wide receivers. Now, that could be because the wide receivers just weren't interested in coming to Michigan until they see the proof of concept, or that could be, hey, we don't want to shell out a ton of money until we know what we have on this roster. That's probably the way I think Sharon Moore is looking at it. And there's probably an element of, hey, we got to show that we're a different offense before the wide receivers start coming, which would make sense too. I mean, if we all put ourselves in a fifth-year senior wide receiver spot where you're looking at one more year of eligibility to show you're an NFL draft kind of guy, from what you saw from Michigan's offense in 2024, even with your selling that they have Bryce Underwood, would you want to go to Michigan with that last year? No, probably not. And so there's an element of, hey, maybe we got to put it together in 2025 and then start selling to the wide receivers. This is the spot to be. We'll see how it works out. That's kind of my take on the situation. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. Let it fly in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.